name is Janet Grant, and I am the vice chair here at Fair Districts, Georgia, and I also am responsible for our legislative advocacy activities. So really pleased to welcome you here today. Normally, we would be doing this kind of an advocacy day or a lobby day in person. Last year, we actually did two of these down under the Gold Dome. And we would love to be there again with you in person, but that's just not possible this year. Hopefully next year we will be able to be together for this kind of an activity. But we decided we didn't want to just skip this year. And Hildegard Gray, who you're going to meet later in the program, is on our legislative advocacy team. And she really helped us reimagine this session to do it in a virtual format. So we think we have some really interesting information to share with you. And then we are going to do some advocacy together in a unique way a little later in the program. So again, we're really happy to have you here. We are recording this program today, by the way, and I'm going to go on and just share a little bit about the agenda before we get started. So we will give just a very brief introduction to Fair Districts for those of you that haven't participated in one of our programs before. And then we're really excited to have Liz White with us, who I'll introduce here in a little bit. And she is going to tell us about a real success story from Virginia that is really relevant for us in imagining the marathon that we're on here in Georgia. We have three legislators that are planning to join us, and they are all in session right now. So we are hoping that those are short sessions today and that they'll be with us, and we'll do a panel discussion with our legislators. And then we're going to go into the advocacy portion where we'll talk a little bit about what it means to be a citizen advocate, and we're going to do a virtual rope line activity together, and then we'll wrap up. So again, we're really happy to have you here. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Ken Lawler, who's our chair of Fair Districts, and he's going to give you a little more information in terms of introducing Fair Districts. Ken?
Thank you, Janet. And I want to add my welcome to everybody who's joining us. I'll have to tell you that I first got involved with Fair Districts, Georgia on a lobby day under the Gold Dome. I had no idea what I was doing, but the group brought me on board, taught me the ropes, if you will, no pun intended, because we had an actual rope line down at the Capitol. But I found it really interesting and engaging, and it was my chance to make my voice heard with my legislature about an issue I cared about. And I got to talk to my own representative and senator, plus others, including some in the leadership. And I just think it was a very, very good way to get involved with Fair Districts. And that now is about 2.5 years ago. I've now stepped up to try to help lead the organization through this critical year, which of course is the year for redistricting. And that's why we're so excited to be on this program today. A little bit of background. We are a nonpartisan organization that works to end electoral map rigging. Nonpartisan means we are equal opportunity critics of both Democrats and Republicans, but in addition, in terms of today's program, we will be reaching out to both Republicans and Democrats to try to have them listen to our story and advocate for a more transparent and fair process. We are absolutely nonpartisan. We don't get involved in electioneering, but we want our fair maps through our legislature. Our focus, of course, is to fight gerrymandering, which is the practice of drawing legislative lines to favor any group over another, whether it's a racial group, an ethnic group, a partisan group, one party over the other. We want the playing field to be level for everybody. Our long-term goal is to reform the process for drawing the state and federal electoral maps. And in fact, we have been advocating for legislation. However, crossover day being yesterday, we were not able to get any legislation done. That does not stop us because we absolutely are going to be advocating right now today and on an ongoing basis for fair maps using the current legal framework that we have. Our perspective on this is that Georgia is a swing state. The Democrats would say, oh, we've turned it blue. The Republicans would say, not so fast. Our view is, no question, if you look at 2018 and 2020, we've arrived as a swing state. That means that our legislative and congressional districts need to reflect that new reality. It doesn't mean they're going to be 50-50, but they ought to be balanced between the parties and obviously balanced from a racial perspective, right? And so our view is that as we advocate for fair maps this year, we believe we have the right to ask for fair maps. We believe that we need to all think about the fact that we've arrived as a swing state. On the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about our strategy for the year. Or actually, I'll talk a little bit about our timeline so you understand what's going to happen this year. So again, we're in the regular legislative session now, and that ends on March 31st. Around about April, you're going to hear about the census data being released, but that's the state population totals and the congressional reapportionment, meaning Georgia will know how many people in the state as a whole and how many congressional seats do we have. We don't expect to gain or lose seats, by the way. Then in the spring and summer timeframe, there will be local hearings throughout the state by the legislative committees. We believe this is going to happen, but we are assuming at this point we are still waiting on a plan for the committee. So as these hearings come out to your corner of the state, we will be helping you get ready for those hearings. Stay tuned for further programming on that subject. Two key dates, September 30th. The full census data, which normally comes in March, is going to be late. It's going to come on September 30th. That's when map drawing can really start. And that means that in the October timeframe, starting in October, the legislature will be drawing official plans. And then sometime in late 2021 or early 22, there will be a special legislative session to vote on these redistricting plans. So our ultimate target is to affect those maps that are being drawn in October. But in the meantime, we are advocating for a fair and transparent process so that as the hearings are conducted, as the data is being generated and all that, that we are asking for a transparent process. And you'll see that's a big theme of the messages we want to deliver today. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about our strategy for the year. So look, we have three main goals this year. Goal number one is to try to get fair maps drawn within the current legal framework. We don't have the force of new laws or legislation to help us. So we are basically trying to advocate for fair maps, meaning balance between the parties, racial makeup, and so on, right? But to get to goal number one, you have to have goal number two, which is let's improve the transparency of the process. Let's have the legislature show their work, show us what you're doing. We are also bringing to the table some outside influence. We have a partnership with Princeton University, which we will talk about in future programs. And you may have heard of this already if you already have been part of our programs, where we are bringing outside benchmarking to the table so that we can help the legislature understand what is racial balance, what is political party balance, what would it look like in Georgia this year with this year's data, right? So we're going to try to improve the transparency of the process by asking for more information, volunteering more input, and ultimately hopefully get a fair map. And then of course, number three is we'd love to get legislation, not going to happen this session, but we will continue to advocate for legislative reform in the future so that whoever draws the maps does it in a fair and transparent manner. So if you look at the next picture, this is kind of a broad picture of what we're up to this year, right? Our target is the General Assembly, right? And we are executing direct advocacy as an organization. Today, we're going to be focusing on us as citizen advocates in the upper left-hand corner. This is our chance to talk to the legislators, whether it's on the phone or through email or however. It's our chance to deliver direct messages to the legislature around how we want the process to work this year, right? There's other ways to get involved, as this diagram shows. You can advocate as a citizen through social media, letters to the editor, to your local paper. There will be work with community groups later on during the year to provide community input to the maps. And then we will be reaching out and are reaching out to other partner organizations and business leaders who we believe also have a stake in a fair mapping process this year. So today is really all about your chance, our chance as citizens to make our voices heard. And I'll leave the rest of up to the rest of the program. You're going to hear exactly how we're going to do that. You'll get great training. All I can tell you is that's how I got hooked, and I hope you get hooked in helping Fair Districts Georgia, because there is a lot to do. We can have some fun doing it, and we actually can make a difference. We really have a shot at making a difference this year. So with that, Janet, I'm going to leave the introduction there, and I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Ken. Well, I am really pleased that that we have a speaker to really kind of energize us as we go into this Advocacy Day today, to know that advocacy can really make a difference. And with us today is Liz White, and Liz is the Executive Director of One Virginia 2021. She'll have to tell us what that means. And previously, she served as the deputy director. She just became executive director, I think, about maybe 3 months ago. And she has been with the organization since 2015, though. So she has the long view of what it took in Virginia to get true redistricting reform in place. And the reason that we really reached out to Liz to see if she could join us is because when we look around the country at other states that have a similar situation to Georgia, Virginia stands out. Many states that have done redistricting reform have been able to do that through citizen initiatives, where you can take up a ballot initiative and get signatures in order to get something on a ballot. Unfortunately, we don't have that ability to do that in Georgia, and neither did Virginia. So they also needed to go through a legislative process and a constitutional amendment. So with that, I am going to welcome Liz to Georgia, virtually to Georgia, and we're interested to hear about that journey in Virginia.
Unmuting myself. Hello. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you so much for having me. I was saying before everybody got on, this is putting together my presentation to talk to you all about kind of where you are in the process. I found it's a lot of the stuff I really like talking about. It's the incredible volunteers and grassroots activities that really make this happen. And seeing all of you on this call it just means you're on the right track and you've got all the tools that you need to get this done. So thank you for having me. This is going to be so fun. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. All right. So I called the presentation an ongoing success story. I do not mean to imply that we were successful every step of the way, or that this was ever easy or a guarantee or something, anything other than the quixotic, quest that I'm sure you all feel like you're on. But we are now a success story, and yet we're not done. So that is what I meant by that. But I want to talk a little bit about where we were 10 years ago. So at this time, right before the 2011 redistricting, Virginia was kind of a unique case that has actually been a great talking point for us for the last 10 years. The Democrats were in charge of the state Senate, and the Republicans were in charge of the state House. And everyone who had been working on this issue, because we are by no means the first iteration of a reform group coming at this issue. We are the first group to form full-time focused on this issue, and mid-decade. Usually this looked a lot like, some members of the chamber, some community leaders, some concerned citizens pulled aside their legislative buddies in the end of the decade and said, hey, you guys really, maybe don't gerrymander this time. And the legislators went, yeah, okay. But they thought maybe this time, because there was not one party control, maybe this was the opportunity for some real reform. And it turns out what they got was a nice bipartisan incumbent protection plan. And you only have to look back one redistricting cycle in Virginia to remember that this is not about right versus left. It's about right versus wrong. It is so much bigger. Not that it's not about partisan control, because for sure that seems to be important to people. But it is more about power and preserving power. And it turns out in Virginia, the Democrats gerrymandered the Senate, the Republicans gerrymandered the House, and then they passed each other's bill, knowing full well that their party colleagues in the opposite chamber could lose their seats, specific seats. They knew about, personal stories where districts got drawn from the southern part of the state. Oh, look, now the 3rd district is up in the northwestern part of the state. They knew all of it was happening, and they voted to preserve their own district and to keep their own reelection strategy as guaranteed as possible. Um, Gerrymandering is petty and it's personal. And the more you learn about it, as you all know, you're all here in the middle of an afternoon, you all know about gerrymandering and that it is just gross. And the more you learn about it and the more you watch legislators cling desperately to it, I mean, so many times we left the General Assembly and just felt, you need a shower. But that also makes for a good story. This seems like such a nerdy, niche, academic, bloodless issue. And then you realize that no matter what your political affiliation is, no matter what your partisan stance is, no one wants it to work like this. If you're conservative, this is not small government. Letting politicians choose their voters is the very opposite of small government and the very definition of government overreach. And if you are if you're liberal, you're looking at the fairness aspect. I mean, even in our messaging, we found that those were the things that really resonated with voters. But no matter what, it's not supposed to work like this. You can look at a map and know that that did not get drawn with the best interest of voters in mind. For example, I know you all know that no presentation about gerrymandering is complete without maps. So we like this one a lot, partly because it looks okay. I mean, you look at some of the districts, I know in your own state, we have one that looks like a toilet bowl that usually is our poster child. Some of those crazy ones across the country, but this one's kind of square, looks okay. Which is how and which is what reminds us that it's not just about shape. If you look at this Senate district, one, it's Frankenstein's district. I know you all are not from Virginia, but I assure you that Charlottesville over in the west and Fredericksburg over in that eastern corner are both pretty decent sized cities. They have nothing to do with each other, nothing in common. Fredericksburg is almost a bedroom community for DC. Charlottesville is very much its own thing. And then Culpeper, all the way up at the top, has nothing really to do with either of them. So they took pieces of each of these individual communities, lumped them in with everything in the middle, and now no one is well served. Culpeper it's a pretty small city, and it is in 3 different Senate districts. And one might argue that don't they now have 3 times the representation in the state Senate? But the senators who represent it will say themselves and have said themselves, it's the 7th biggest municipality in their district. Their piece of Culpeper, they've got 6 other municipalities that they need to worry about. So Culpeper gets nothing. Culpeper is not the top of anybody's list. So no one is well served by a district like this. Mid-decade horse trading, in the middle of this past decade, as populations shifted a little bit and settled, a Republican senator and a Democratic senator kind of looked at that area in Charlottesville and went, oh, you know what? I'll just trade you those 2 red districts for these 2 blue districts. We'll just trade. And that way both of us have easier reelection and it's fine. Luckily, our governor at the time, he would not sign any bills about mid-decade redistricting. It was perfectly legal until this latest constitutional amendment passed. So luckily that little plan didn't pass, but it's bipartisan. It's just gross. And it wasn't about keeping communities together or about the people who lived in those precincts. It was just about making their jobs a little easier. And then my favorite part of this district is the just brazen elimination of competition, and not saying, oh, well, we're going to, make this district super red or super blue. No, this district was drawn to protect an incumbent Democrat because there was a real up and comer on the city council or the county board of supervisors. And he lived, I don't know if can you see my cursor? He lived right here in this little neighborhood. And so they went into that map. I mean, you would think this pretty major road would be where you would draw that line, but they went into Fawn Lake development and carved out a cul-de-sac where this up and comer Bryce Reeves lived. Um, they happened to get the wrong Reeves family. So they missed, and Bryce Reeves won that seat. But it was the first story I heard about it being that specific, that personal, that technologically precise, that was even an option. So this is where we were 10 years ago. Da, 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 da. And then here comes One Virginia on our bike with our flag. We're, again, the latest iteration in a long line of reform-minded individuals and organizations who, like the League of Women Voters, who tackled this issue, but not exclusively. One Virginia 2021, we always said that was our mission and our deadline, all in one name. I don't know what we're going to do with that name after this year, because 2021 is here. It seemed really far away at the time. But here we are. So 2014 and 2015, when the former executive director and I both came on board, that saw complete Republican control of both chambers, one seat away from a supermajority in the House, because their gerrymander was a lot better in 2011 than the Democrats. They hired an outside firm, and it was 66-34 in our House of Delegates. And as I mentioned, this prevailing attitude from the legislature was still, I don't hear about this issue at home. I'm not going to do anything about this issue. No one talks to me about this at home. They talk about transportation and they talk about healthcare and they talk about lots of other things. I'm not hearing about gerrymandering. And that's true, because in 2014, 2015, I'm one of the first things I read when I came into this job was a study and recommendations on how to message about this issue, because you can't use the word gerrymandering. No one knows what that is. And let me tell you, there is not a good synonym. We tried a lot of things, and luckily that's not so much a problem anymore. But I talked to, I was out collecting supporter signups, and I asked a gentleman who had just voted, so a politically engaged gentleman. I said, do you know about gerrymandering? And I swear to you, he said, is he a Republican? So who's Jerry was a pretty typical question. We came into this with about 3,500 names in our database, people who had said, I'm interested in fixing this, and agreed to receive our emails. Our toolkit that we built in those first couple years included things, we partnered with our local PBS station and created a documentary called Jerry Rigged, Turning Democracy on Its Head. It is on YouTube. It's pretty outdated for Virginia at this point, but it was a good overview of the problem, and it had some national implications as well. We also have a 4-minute clip that just explains redistricting and gerrymandering. That is still relevant, especially in states that haven't passed reform yet. So feel free to borrow that. That's on our website. The other thing we created was we worked with Represent Us and blatantly stole their honest political ad concept. And we created a character named Delegate Jerry Mandering. And Delegate Mandering promises to listen to his constituents, but really he's going to go play golf, because it doesn't matter if he listens. He's just going to get reelected because of those lines, because he gets to draw his own lines. We got one of those little machines that draw the lines on baseball fields, and had him just going down the middle of the street. And so using humor, using different media to explain this problem, anything to make the concept of gerrymandering and redistricting at all sexy, was really a challenge when Who's Jerry was still kind of the prevailing feeling in the zeitgeist. And then this was our most valuable tool, I think, since just about the beginning. We used to call it the petition, and then we realized that because we're not a citizen initiative state, we could get 1 billion signatures and it would not make any difference. So it's not really a petition. We settled on action form, but this is how we collected names. This is how we built our list. We sent our volunteers out. I mean, obviously pre-COVID, and I know we're all adjusting, but we sent our volunteers out with these everywhere. We could adapt the top to kind of where we were in the legislative process. It used to be a lot more vague, then it got a lot more specific, and then it got really specific when we were just trying to pass a second read of the constitutional amendment. If you make a form like this, I can't recommend grid lines enough, because reading handwriting when doing data entry is greatly improved with these lines. But they could be used anywhere. And also that gathered by, gathered at, gathered on at the bottom was a all too recent innovation that I also highly recommend. So you know where those people came from and what kind of place you sent a volunteer, who did it, where they were, and what worked. If they got 2 signatures, maybe don't go back. But if they got 50 signatures, 50, people to sign up, let's go back next weekend. Our biggest method of using those, and my personal baby, we called it presence at the polls. Virginia has elections every year. So voters head to the polls twice a year when you count those primaries, plus there's some municipal elections in May. I mean, we love to have elections apparently. So twice a year, we sent an increasing number of volunteers out. I think we maxed at like 650 people statewide one year. And they had, you can see these little postcards in the middle picture. We called them the rat cards. Just a quick 2 maps, quick demonstration of the problem on one side, how to get in touch with us on the other side. And just sent people to polling places all across the state. They talked to folks on their way out. We like to say they caught them at the height of their civic give a damn, because they just voted, they're feeling good about it. And it's not electioneering. We didn't care who you voted for. We just wanted to talk to you about the issue. It was a hugely successful program. And it sounds like you all have ready and willing volunteers who are ready to do this. And we also have a lot of materials that we've come up with over the years, if that's something that would be helpful to you all. So in 2017, something happened to change American politics. We saw the beginning of 2017, like right after the inauguration, we saw a huge influx of political interest, engagement. We were having showings of our documentary for 15 people. We drive 2 hours, 15 people. We'll talk, and okay, like that's 15 people we didn't have before. Then in a snowstorm, we had an event that we'd already had to postpone once, and 150 people showed up in January of 2017, because everyone who was dismayed with the previous election results, so many of them looked around and went, this cannot be an isolated incident. This must be endemic. This must be indicative of a bigger problem. I want to help with the foundational problems. And a lot of them came to gerrymandering. Literally more volunteers than we knew what to do with, because we realized we needed a better answer to what can I do? That we suddenly were at a point where just educating wasn't enough. We had to mobilize. We also, as I mentioned, have elections every year, and our statewide offices are in odd numbered years. So there was the governor's election and the lieutenant governor and attorney general. And especially in the governor's race, Governor Northam, who are now Governor Northam, tweeted things like this. He's in our documentary. He's, was at least a vocal ally of redistricting reform. And his opponent was Ed Gillespie, who was the fundraiser for Project Red Map, which was the Republican national plan to gerrymander in 2011. So it's a pretty stark difference. We also are nonpartisan. We didn't endorse, we didn't advocate, but local groups and groups that send out surveys, I mean, it became a talking point in that election. And so that was something that really, really helped us just get people talking about the issue. And now all of a sudden we had 50,000 people on our list. The other thing that helped us a lot, and we had nothing to do with either of these cases because they were federal, but something that also helped just get this issue in the news and get this issue on people's minds We had 2 racial gerrymandering cases in the decade, a 2015 one that redrew that monstrosity, which was our third congressional district, and redrew the couple districts around it. Not entirely because of the redraw, but certainly aided by undoing the racial gerrymander. We have 11 Congress people. We went from a 7-4 Republican Democrat split to, I believe, I'd have to count, but I believe a 7-4 Democrat Republican split. Our state is 20% Black, and we now have 2 out of 11 Black representatives. As opposed to before, when, again, I know that you all are not necessarily experts on Virginia geography and demography, but this is Richmond. And I mean, this represents just about every African-American voter in the eastern half of the state. I mean, they managed to just pack them in. And we have rules that say the districts have to be contiguous. And this one is if you count water, which you're allowed to, but unless you have, a jet ski at your disposal, constituent services were probably pretty rough. These are not connected by, it's not like there's a ton of bridges. They're just not cohesive communities. And then the other one that got redrawn is our House of Delegates district. There were 12 majority minority districts that were sued over as racial gerrymanders. 11 of them were ruled to be racial gerrymanders. We redrew about 28 districts. And again, unpacking a Republican created gerrymander gave the Democrats a leg up and gave them the majority in 2019. The other thing we did when we realized we had this influx of people and we weren't quite sure how to mobilize them, we were all in Richmond. We were a staff of 3 and we were all in Richmond and we had folks everywhere. We decided to do a really official kickoff of a 10-month plan. It was on March 4th, so we called it March 4th, without the U. And it was a rally, it was a march to the Capitol, it was a day of, it was a lot like what you all are doing. I mean, it was a march and advocacy training, and then it introduced a lot of people to each other, and that was huge. So out of that event, which I largely missed because I was on maternity leave. But out of that event came our local action groups. They are the pods of volunteers in each section of the state. Some of them are more active than others. Some of them are 30 people. Some of them are 5 people. Some of them, they each function differently. And that's fine because 3 people in Richmond did not know the best way to reach every community in our state. And we handed a lot of control over to our volunteer leaders. 2 of my favorite pictures. This is one of our volunteers in her gerrymander costume. We have two different salamander costumes on volunteers, one's in different cities. And then this is the now Speaker of the House, who I don't think would be so excited to stand by our sign anymore, but at the time she was. But one of the things that the local groups did was meet with their delegates and their senators and go to their town halls, monitor what they're saying, because they're not going to put in print. If they're not in support of redistricting reform, they're either not going to return your survey or they're going to leave that question blank. No one's going to put in writing, no, I like to gerrymander. But listening to them at their town halls or in their constituent meetings or local events, you get a lot of intel into how they really feel. They also start hearing about it at home, and they can't come to Richmond then and say, oh, no one talks to me about this. We say, there are pictures. So this answered the what can I do question. We certainly don't have lags everywhere, but we have them in enough places that we can connect interested, active people with a group. And they also just massive growth through their signature collection endeavors, farmers markets, festivals, parades. There was the March for Science, and our Northern Virginia folks just went to the metro stations. I mean, they're so creative, and it's incredible having people be able to tap into their communities like that. So our legislative plans, mid-decade certainly could best be described as throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks. Um, and I imagine that you all are kind of in this, I mean, because you don't have time to pass legislation now before the maps are drawn, you have this whole other you have a whole decade before it happens again. So I'm sure you have a lot of different options in mind. I mean, we had everything from fine, just pass the criteria. Florida did it, it worked. Um, pass the criteria, no matter who draws maps, they have to follow these rules. Um, we had someone put in for a bill to just study the issue, which is how a lot of our more controversial bills and issues get started, is we're just going to commission a study. I can't imagine we're unique in that. Just passing a regular bill, not amending the Constitution, to have an advisory commission. We tried to get a single sentence into our Constitution that just says you can't draw, it's worded more fancily than this, but it's, you can't draw a district with the intent of helping or hurting a person or a party. We tried, certainly drafted, we had a bipartisan drafting commission from experts and lawyers and scholars from all over the state. It was beautiful. And they came up with a really gorgeous independent commission that did not get enough votes. And then ultimately our hybrid commission, which is what we currently have, and I'll get into a little bit at the end, but it's half legislators and half citizens. It's the first of its kind. But we ended up having to be adaptive and flexible in everything we tried to get through the legislature, because getting them to give up any of their own power, which is what you have to do when you don't have a citizens initiative, is certainly challenging. So this is just our timeline. Virginia requires the bill to pass the legislature twice in a row, no changes, no commas, no words, no nothing, with an election in the middle. So it made our timeline, by the time we got to 2019, that was it. We had to pass it for the first time that year, or we weren't going to be able to do it in time. Because even if it had been the first time in 20, there was no election in time for them to pass it again this year. So
Liz, we're
yeah.
we're running out of time.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. We want to tell the story, but if you can try and wrap it up.
I'll speed it up. The magic formula was, we found if they had 2,000 signatures in their district, a competitive election, and insiders go talk to them. We flipped a couple key Republicans that way. And then our political storm, in short, was no one knew who was going to win in the 2019 elections. So everyone voted for that first read to cover their bases. So we had a lot of luck that we were primed to use. So I certainly wouldn't take full credit for the luck, but work hard and you get luckier. And it sounds like a lot of the things that you all are doing is what we did. So I'm so encouraged to see it. I'm so excited for you all. And then it turns out the Democrats, once they were in the majority, didn't love our redistricting reform anymore, because it's not just about partisanship. No one has a moral monopoly on this issue. But we did ultimately pass with 66% of the vote. That's what we have now. And then I would just commiserate with you that staying nonpartisan, especially in an incredibly and increasingly partisan environment, is really hard, especially when you don't have Republicans in the legislature who are allies on this. My only advice is look national, look local, look beyond electeds, look to the past. Reagan and both Bush presidents have made public comments on this. And then just do your best on boards, panels, event hosts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We are scrupulously multi-partisan at One Virginia, and as a result, have been called secret Democrats and secret Republicans. And I guess that means we're doing it right. And then also ride the national wave. If you're not getting the support you need in your legislature, the biggest weapon you have is yourselves and the public interest and the public pressure. And national attention is going to help with that, because people watch national news. And that's what you got to do, is make the space, with everything you're doing, and then just fill it with voices from as many parts of the state and as many communities as you can. That's all my good advice.
Thank you very much, Liz. As I said, it really is inspiring to see kind of the journey, and we're earlier in that journey. Hopefully we'll have a slide deck like this in years to come to talk about the reforms that have happened in Georgia. I had maybe one question for you before we move to our legislative panel, and one that came up in the chat, and that is just how important was media in the journey here, and any advice that you have for how best to work with media.
I will say we found that editorial boards in general were very pro-reform. I mean, Virginia doesn't have huge cities, but our major newspapers, and we do have the Washington Post, we had great editorial support from them. Keeping them educated is very important. Keep them in the loop. Train them to look to you as their source of knowledge, especially during the legislative session. If there are bills up that are pertaining to this issue, you want to be the ones they go to. It is especially important just in public education and public awareness. And if you have events like this, especially when we're allowed to go back in person, just because the pictures are better, but at the rope line, if you have an extraordinary number of people, let them know. If they need to know that people care about this sleepy issue. And it's not as sleepy as it used to be, but it's still, they don't think they're going to be held accountable for this until you tell them.
Great. Well, thank you, Liz.
Sure.
And thank you for joining us today. Yeah, we wish we could do a virtual applause here.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
So fun.
And I think we have 2 of our 3 legislators have joined us. Our third one, I believe, is still on the Senate floor. I'm kind of watching out of the corner of my eye, and the Senate is still in session. But joining us now, we're really pleased to have 2 of our representatives from the House. And first of all, Representative Carolyn Hughley. Hello, Carolyn, how are you? She looks a little frozen. There, okay. And Representative Hughley is, she represents the 136th district, and I know we have some folks from Columbus on the call today, Carolyn, so you may be their representative.
Val, hey Val.
And she has been in her seat literally since 1993. This is her 15th term. And so she is going into, I think it's, what would that be? Your 3rd redistricting cycle coming up here. So we've got kind of that historical perspective. And then we're also welcoming Representative Matt Wilson. Hi, Representative Wilson. And he is, oh, you're muted. He is joining us from the 80th district, which includes Brookhaven, primarily DeKalb County. And this is his 2nd term. And he has introduced in both his initial term and this term some of the redistricting reform legislation. So we're really happy to have both of you with us. Senator Parent, I think, is still on the floor in the Senate, so we will we'll forge on here. So as we said to the group at the start of the program, this is the year. This is the year for redistricting. And so wanted to just start off and maybe get some perspective from each of you about what your expectations are for this year, and give us a little bit in terms of what your concerns are as well. Representative Hughley, you want to start us out?
Thank you, Janet. And let me say hello to everyone. This year, as Janet said, I've been through a couple of reapportionments. I came to the Georgia House of Representatives after the reapportionment of 1990, and it created an open seat in my area. So that seat was open. I ran for the seat, and the people have been kind to me ever since. But what I expect is that because the census information has been delayed, we're going to have a very rushed and harried session when we come back for a special session. Normally, we would come back in the summer and take a look at the districts. If you will notice, the last reapportionment maps were passed in August. And so that's normally the time frame. It's normally July, August time frame when we're doing this work. But because the time frames have been pushed back, we're going to be into the fall. And Georgia does not have a timeline like some other states where we have to have it done by a certain day. We just have to have it done in time for the elections to be held next year. And of course, our qualifying time is in March. And so if we don't get the data till September, and they're saying late September, we're going to be spending some holiday time, look like drawing maps. And so that's going to be a challenge for us. And because of COVID-19, the Census Bureau procedures were different, and they didn't do what they normally do and how they normally would have done it. So we don't know exactly what the numbers are going to look like, but for us, our challenge is going to be that of timing more than anything else. The rest of the beds will pretty much follow the same thing. My biggest concern is making sure that we have input from the citizens, from the public, because the public is supposed to choose us, not the other way around. So we need to make sure, and our caucus is going to be working to make sure that we create our citizens to participate in this process. So those are my primary concerns: time and citizen opportunity to participate in the process.
Great. And we're going to probably come back to both of those topics because those are such critical things in a minute here. But first, Representative Wilson, what's your expectations and your concerns?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Janet, and thanks Fair Districts for having me today. It's always great when I get to be with you. And what a treat that we get to have Representative Hewley here with us, because she is very much the expert. And in case it wasn't already apparent, for the Georgia House Democratic Caucus, she is our expert in residence on redistricting. So I have been very much picking her brain and listen very closely to everything that she's saying on this, because she's very much helping us manage our expectations as we go through this. And you know, I don't have too much to add to what she said as far as what to expect. I think it's going to be, you know, based on what we've heard, it's going to be a late in the year process. It's probably going to be very rushed and hurried. Which leads to a concern of it not being transparent and not allowing for, you know, I've only been here for 3 years serving in the legislature, but anyone who's been down here during session knows how quickly things change, and then meetings get called, and then bills get passed, and then before you know it, you know, and there hasn't even been time for a news article about it, right? So things move very fast down here just normally. And so then add on top of that redistricting with a lot at stake, and it being late in the year. And one of the other things, you know, that kind of concerns me is as someone, you know, who has been in a competitive district and sort of fearing that I might get redistricted out. You know, one of the things when we qualify for our office, we have to sign an affidavit that we've lived in the district for a year. At the point a year from the election, the time of the election. And so I don't know, are we going to have to change that based on this deadline? Who knows? Those are questions I still have.
Yeah. I had that conversation with someone the other day, and that is actually going to be one of my questions to you, or you know, whether that's something we should be advocating for, to kind of waive that requirement for this year. I had a conversation with a representative the other day who said that she and her husband were planning to move, and in order to downsize, and she had decided she was going to move right into the very middle of her district so that she could be sure that she was living, hopefully not be, kind of cul-de-saced out, as the example that Liz gave us from Virginia earlier. So Representative Hughley, Representative Wilson just mentioned that you are the lead, that Leader Beverly placed you as the lead for the House Democratic Caucus on redistricting. Can you share a little bit with us in terms of what that means and how you all are approaching it?
Well, that just means that the leader is looking to me to help our members get prepared for redistricting. And what we're doing is making sure that we provide information, because many of our members have never gone through this process before, and this is the most political thing that we will ever do. And so we have to help them to manage expectations. We have to say to them that don't move right now. Stay where you are. And now is not a good time to move. Because every reapportionment cycle, somebody gets caught. They find a great deal on the house and they just move. And sometimes it makes it difficult for whoever's drawing the map to keep them in their district. I remember Representative Nikki Randall found a great house, moved right before redistricting. And I said, I don't know if we're going to be able to keep you in your district. And she said, I like my house. Y'all just draw the maps. And so, of course, it worked out. But it always happens. Because somebody, life happens, we're legislators, but life happens, our families change, and that's going to happen. But about us having to be there a year, I think will probably hold. And even though this is a shorter period of time and it's rushed, if we are going to hold true to the notion that the citizens choose us and not the other way around, then we should not ask for that.
Okay.
The main thing for our members that we're advising them to do is to get to know your district, know what it looks like on the map, know how it is connected to the districts around it. What are your communities of interest? What makes your district special and unique? What connects the people in your district? For our members in the metropolitan area, we're telling them that you probably are sitting in a district that's going to be over the population ideal. So it's very important for you to know every aspect of that district. So when the lines are moved, or when a community is taken out and moved somewhere else, you need to know what that means. And you need to know whether that's breaking up a community of interest. So we're stressing, get to know the communities of interest in your district. If you're outside of the metropolitan area, like folk like us down in Columbus, Macon, Augusta, South Georgia, on the coast over like in Liberty County, I think I saw somebody out here from Liberty County, over that way, those districts will probably be a little bit below the ideal number. And so it's very important for you to know what your communities of interest are, who's around you, what might happen, and how you can best keep those populations together and not have the line drawn where it completely divides off groups of people who have always voted together, or they come together around a school or economic center or something like that. So we're stressing, please, ma'am, please, sir, get to know your district. Nobody's going to know it like you do.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody is going to know the interests of the people like you do. And so I'm sure you all are telling citizens the same thing. Get to know your communities of interest so that you can advocate for them And so we're doing the same thing that you're doing, telling our members, get to know your communities of interest, make sure that you are prepared to help educate citizens about this process, and make sure that even if the House does not have an open process, then our caucus is going to have hearings and try and open up this process as much as possible. So from the minority, that's about as much as we can do. But we're ready to do that work.
Representative Hughley, you've mentioned a couple of times, and you kind of did define it, but maybe just for our participants, can you define what a community of interest is? It's a big topic in redistricting.
Well, yes, that's one of the redistricting principles, of course, and that's one that the Georgia House utilized the last time. And so a community of interest is, the way I would describe it is an area group, or it could be such that a group of people are gathered together with a common interest. It could be a school that might be everybody in this area comes together around this school. It could be an economic center. Everybody in a particular area is around the economic center. It could be language. Everybody in this area or share a same heritage or share a same language. Or it could be these people normally vote together. They normally share the same interests and they vote together. So I'm sure Janet and I see Ken is on here. You guys are the experts, but that's how I explain it to people, that's what a community of interest is.
Thank you for that. Representative Wilson, you have sponsored on the House side, and Senator Parent has been the sponsor on the Senate side, several redistricting bills last session and again this session. Can you kind of briefly describe those bills and what your expectations are? I guess since we're past crossover day, this year we're not going to see a lot of movement, but what your expectations or hopes are for that legislation in the future.
Yeah, so the two bills are two bills that this group will probably be intimately familiar with. The Democracy Act, which this year was House Resolution 55, which would call for an independent redistricting commission. And then House Bill 189, known as the Transparency Act, which would say, okay, if we're going to keep the current system that we have, let's at least make sure that there are protocols in place to make it an open and transparent process that engages the citizens and allows for them, allows for their input. So, for example, providing notices for hearings, having a public website where the maps are posted and there are interactive maps that people can pull up their street address, for example, and see what the implications are for their particular district. Yeah, Janet, you summarized it well. I introduced them in the House. Senator Parent introduced them in the Senate. Neither one was taken up, and so they are, for all sakes and intents and purposes, dead for this session. But it doesn't mean that we can't still get some movement on those policies in an informal way. Commitments from the chairman of the committees, for example. I've been engaging on the House side, Bonnie Rich, representative from Gwinnett County, who is the chair on the House side. She is obviously not the only one who's setting the rules for this process. And she and I came into the legislature together in 2018. So we know each other well. She is a relatively young legislator in her third term, like me. And so you might imagine she's not going to have a lot of control over this process. But she is open to these conversations and this dialogue. She does want to see, Ken, I saw your post in the chat about having sessions around the state. And that's one thing in particular that I've mentioned to her, and she wants to do that. Now, whether or not that means it happens is a different story, but those conversations are important for us, all of us, to be having right now as that process is being designed and kind of mapped out.
If I could just jump in the past, the committees have traveled all around the state and had listening sessions with people in the various areas. But it would be more meaningful if when they went around the state, they had some semblance of what the maps might look like. So that people could comment on that. But in the past, they went around to different areas and just had a listening session, and people would come and they would say, well, I like my congressman and I want to stay in Congressman Bishop's district, since that's my congressman, I'll pick on him. Or they would say that we want our city to remain whole and our city to remain within XYZ's district. Those are the kinds of things that people were saying when we went out for those public hearings. But as you all are working with groups of citizens across the state, and as you help them define their communities of interest, they will be in a better position to tell legislators when they come to their areas, this is important. These are our communities of interest, and this is why this piece of geography needs to stay together and needs to go one place or the other. And that was something that we did not hear in the past, because, you know, redistricting is not a hot topic. It's not a sexy topic that a lot of people are interested in and want to talk about, but it's very important because it is the foundation, one of the foundations that we have. Every vote equals the same, one person, one vote, and that we don't have people drawn such that their votes will not really matter or will not have as much influence or impact as it would otherwise have. So that was one of the things that we have done in the past. And I can tell you, being a former chair of redistricting, that the redistricting chair, there are people at a higher level that's going to say how that map's going to be drawn above and beyond that redistricting chair. But we will have our members, our Democratic members on that committee will be advocating for public hearing, for transparency, for the standard redistricting principles, such as communities of interest, such as compactness, you know, those kinds of things that are important. So our members will be advocating for that once the committee process gets started and they come up with what our rules are going to be. So that's the beginning of the game, to try and get a framework that can be agreed upon that we're going to operate on. And of course, oftentimes when public hearings are out there, people are more concerned about Congress than they are the state legislature, and they might be more concerned about the state legislature than they are their school board members districts. But all of the districts have to be redrawn, and so all of that needs to be taken into consideration as people come to talk about their communities of interest and what's important to them.
Thank you for that. So the Brennan Center came out a few weeks ago with an assessment of the states that were most at risk to be gerrymandered in this cycle. And unfortunately, Georgia was one of the top 4 states, along with Florida, Texas, and North Carolina, kind of our southern states here. So what do you think when you hear that, and what are the things that we can be thinking about collectively about how to try and mitigate that risk? Representative Wilson, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not very surprising, right? We've all been in this fight for a while, some of us a lot longer than others, but you know, even those of us who are new to this, that's not surprising. We saw as we see the demographics shift in the state, in particular, you look at our state house, where our numbers are getting very close to a 50-50 split in the state house on party lines. There's a lot more at stake, you know, so there's a lot more reason for the party in power to maintain that power at all costs. And you know, it's a bipartisan effort, as the previous speaker was saying. We know, we've seen that in the past, but you know, we've also got a great opportunity right now, because we've got so many people whose eyes are watching, especially with the voter suppression efforts that are moving through the legislature this session. We have had protesters down here at the Capitol almost every single day. And there are thousands and thousands and hopefully millions more people at home who are at least vaguely aware that something is going on. And you know, the polling numbers just show overwhelmingly people disapprove of this. So we've got an opportunity, if we can show how these two things are connected, to really tap into some emotions that are already there.
Representative Hughley?
Well, in Georgia's case, I'd like to try and stay in my lane. So in Georgia's case, we are on that list because all three branches are under the control of the Republicans. And the voters, as you saw in the last election, does not reflect that Georgia is a solid Republican state. Georgia is a competitive state. And so if you're the party in power, your goal will be to draw as many districts as possible. They got to try and create a district for every member that they currently have within their caucus. And that's going to be hard to do. But that's going to be the pressure that's being put upon them. And so that is what will put us on that list, because they got to try and keep all of the seats that they have, when we know that Georgia is more closely to a 50-50 as opposed to the numbers that we currently have right now. So I think that's going to be the stress and the issue that they are going to have. The other thing that encourages me is the fact that the benefit of COVID-19 showed us that we can have more transparency, we can have more citizen involvement, and you can sit at home in your easy chair, in your kitchen, wherever, and participate. And so this round of redistricting will not be like the previous rounds where people actually had to come to the Capitol. And so legislators are going to be more accessible. There's going to be more transparency. People will have an opportunity to know more about what we're doing. And I think that's going to yield a better result. And even though the legislation that has been introduced by my colleagues are not going to move this session, that's not unusual for legislative pieces. I always say that public policy and politics is about timing and opportunity. You can have a good idea, and we see it all the time. We have good ideas that we may have introduced 5 years ago, and somebody else comes along and introduces the same thing, and it gets approved 5, 6 years later. So it's about timing and opportunity. So it's important for us to keep introducing bills like what my colleagues have introduced, to keep it top of mind, to keep working on it. And in due time, those bills will pay off and they will make a difference. And if nothing else, it lets our colleagues on the other side of the aisle know that people are interested in this and people are paying attention, and they cannot do what has always been done.
Great, thank you. I think that is true. We are in a marathon here versus a sprint. And as we heard from Liz in Virginia, when they formed in, I think it was 2014, they called themselves One Virginia 2021, knowing that, and they made their goal, at least in terms of some major reform. So as we move the group now to our virtual rope line exercise, I would like to just give you each a chance to give your best advice. What's your best advice for citizen advocates, and what can we best do to advocate for fair maps. Representative Wilson, you want to start?
Sure. You know, the best advice I have right now is to focus your conversations outside the Capitol. Talk to, you know, your friends, your family members, you know, your church friends, whoever you're talking to, especially as politics comes up. Make sure that they're aware this is a redistricting year, and make sure they understand what that is. You don't have to, they don't have to know all the finer points of it, but they need to know that, hey, this is a big, huge thing that's happening that's going to determine, you know, a lot for the next decade here in Georgia. And we need to have as many Georgians have that on their radar as possible. And so that work should be happening now. And so we can build a critical mass of folks, and then we can all turn our focus to the Capitol.
Great, thank you. Representative Ugly?
I would say that we need to focus on what's important in our areas, get to know our communities of interest, talk to the people that represent us. We need to, I would say, organize and educate yourselves as well as your friends and neighbors about this. And, you know, people often get confused between what reapportionment is and redistricting, because we talk about those two things interchangeably. And of course, redistricting means that we're just going to redraw the map so that everybody's vote will count the same. One person, one vote. And if the maps are done correctly, your vote, you will have the same opportunity as anybody else to elect the person of your choice. And so that's what we want for everyone. We want everybody to be in a district where they have the same opportunity as their neighbors to elect the person of their choice to represent them. And so that's why it's important. You know, we talk about voting, and of course, voting is very important, but we want to make sure those votes matter and those votes count and those votes are weighted to make a difference. And that's where redrawing of these districts come into play. So I would say organize, educate, and advocate.
Great. Well, thank you very much. The group can see why we invited the two of you to join us. Really appreciate your perspectives, and we'll give kind of a virtual applause here. And we look forward to working with you as this redistricting year unfolds. This is just the start, and it's going to be an interesting year for sure. And thank you both for your leadership on this issue.
Well, let me thank you for all that you all are doing. I'm just excited that somebody's interested in redistricting. And I'm excited. I got to give a shout out to Val from my hometown. It's very important work, and I'm happy that you all are ready to hit the ground and engage. So thank you for what you do.
Great. And Janet, please, the next time you see my state senator, Senator Parent, you just let her know that we got this covered in the House. Okay?
I will let her know that. I know she's busy on the floor, but and we missed her, but you guys covered it just great. So thank you.
Oh, and Janet, I have to shout out my good friend Joyce Barlow, all the way down from below Albany, Georgia. She's gonna be the next great representative from down that way.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, well, with that, we are going to move to our advocacy portion of the agenda, and I'm going to introduce Hildegard Gray, who serves on our Legislative Advocacy Committee, and she's going to walk us through what we're going to do. It's an interactive part, and we need all of you engaged to get our voices start to be heard this afternoon. So Hildegard.
All right, thank you, Janet. Let me share my screen. Let's see here. Okay, all right. Well, that was really good. I loved hearing about Virginia. That was exciting. And wonderful to have our two representatives here. So let's talk about what it means to be a citizen advocate. Being a citizen advocate means that you have a passion or a really strong desire around some particular issue. Maybe it affects you personally, maybe it affects your family, your community, your state, but it's something you want to have changed. Now, a lot of you have probably done that before, wonderful. And if you haven't, though, I think we've got 4 pretty simple steps to get yourself prepared for being a citizen advocate, both this afternoon and then after you leave this session. So the first one is do your homework. Whatever your issue is, make sure you are really clear on both sides of the argument. If you're talking about something that is in the Senate or in Congress somewhere, make sure you know the bill number, you know the wording in that particular bill. So do as much homework as you can before you get ready to make your voices heard. Then you need to know whom to contact. Now we're really lucky here, I guess, with with the internet. We're going to post 2 links in chat. One of them is the Open State links, a great link to save somewhere in your bookmarks. You put in your address and it tells you who your representative is and who your senator here in Georgia. The other link is from DataMade, and that one is same as the first one. You put in your address, and it tells you all your representatives. So that could be at the local level. That's your city council for me in Atlanta, for example, is everyone on my city council. It's the judges, it's the county information, and of course the state representative, my state senator, and federal. So both of those are really good to have in terms of knowing whom to contact and all the information around that. Then you need to decide how you're going to contact them. So if it's an issue like perhaps one of the voting bill last week, there isn't a whole lot of time. So if time is of the essence, a phone call is probably the best. Just call and tell them exactly, you know, where you stand on the issue. Another way to contact, which is easy and very efficient, I have to say, is email. Because once you've formulated your message, you can cut and paste it to multiple different people. Also, let's not forget social media. Twitter and Facebook are fabulous ways to get something out very quickly. Let me also say that certainly all our local officials and federal officials are on Twitter. So if you want to know how they feel about issues, follow them on Twitter. The last one is to formulate the message, and this is really important. So you want to be concise. If you're asking for an action, you want them to vote yay or nay on a specific issue, make sure you state that. Again, if it's a bill, put the bill number in there. Be concise. You don't need to give them a whole lot of information. Just say, here's where I stand, here's why, here's what I need you to do. And of course, be respectful. If it so happens that your representative or your senator actually votes the way you want them to, it's also nice to follow up with a thank you note. Okay, so that's in general, those are the 4 steps. So now let's talk about what we're going to do this afternoon specifically. Sorry. Well, I'm having trouble here. There we go. Let's do our homework on these issues. Now, we've really done a lot already in the hour or so we spent together. We've heard about Fair Districts Georgia and what we do here. We've heard from Virginia and how they were successful. And then our 2 representatives were great in giving us some ideas around how to do this in Georgia. We do want to highlight the 2 acts that Representative Matt Wilson spoke about. Those are the ones that he actually introduced in the House. We have both of them are introduced both in the House and in the Senate. As Janet said earlier, crossover day happened yesterday. So the odds that these will be passed in this year are slim to none, but that doesn't mean we don't want to keep people aware of it. So when we're asking our representatives, our senators, we're asking them to co-sponsor these particular acts. And just so we have a sense also that this is this is not a sprint, this is a long distance run. The Democracy Act is actually a resolution, and it calls for a constitutional amendment. That means it has to pass the House, it has to pass the Senate, it has to be signed by the governor, and it has to go on the ballot. Then it has to be ratified by the voters before it eventually takes effect. Couple years anyway. Transparency Act, however, is a bill, and the Transparency Act is a subset of the Democracy Act. It speaks very specifically to the ways we would like the committees to interact with the community as they draw the maps. So that one is a bill. You know, again, it's been moved, it's been proposed, but it has not come into the committees, and it certainly hasn't met a vote yet. But you know, again, we want people to be aware that we're watching and that these are important to us. So that's step one. We have two reapportionment committees. There's one in the Senate and there's one in the House, and we will be providing all those names, email addresses, and phones to you in a template in a minute. We provided 2 links for you to find your senator and your representative. So those are the people we're going to contact around this specific issue today. Step 3, you can email them, you can phone them, or you can post to social media. Those are your 3 options today. We have templates for all of those, and that's our step 4. So we are posting right now in chat the link to the templates. In that, we have a variety of options for you. You can pick, pick and choose from all of them into a make it your own single email, or pick one of them and work on that right now. Work on the rest of them after you get home. So again, we have email scripts, we have phone scripts, and we have some pictures, some hashtags for social media posts. So if you could click on that link and open that up now, I have on the next slide a sample. So this is one on transparent redistricting. So let's say you've decided you're going to write to the senators on the reapportionment committee, and Senator Kennedy is the chair of that committee. So of course you would tailor your heading to Dear Senator Kennedy. Down further in the body down here, I hope you can see my cursor, you would pick, this was Senator Kennedy, so we would say, please sign on as a co-sponsor to the Transparency Act, parens Senate Bill 186. And then at the bottom say, comes to a vote in the House or Senate. We have included on our list what districts these people are in. So if you happen to be a constituent, that is a really important component of this. Your voice carries a lot more weight if you're a constituent. No matter what, you're going to sign with your name and address. But if you are a constituent, start that one right in the beginning. I am writing as a constituent of yours, Senator, etc. Okay, at the bottom of the template, you will see the lists of the committee members. So this is a portion of the list for the Senate committee, the Senate Redistricting Committee. Again, these are the committees that actually draw the maps and bring their maps, in this case, to the Senate to be voted on. So they're very important people. So John Kennedy is the one I just spoke about, District 18. There's his email, his phone number, and we've included the admin's name. So if you choose to make a call, it would be nice to say, oh, hello, Ms. Farmer, this is so-and-so, here's why I'm calling you. The emails are hyperlinked. So depending on the email application that you use, you should be able to click on that. And it will bring up your email application and populate the to field. So again, take the templates, modify them as you see fit, personalize them, and then at that point you can cut and paste as you send more of them. Okay, so I think that pretty much explains the templates. If you need help, ask for it in chat. We have a couple of people who are going to be monitoring chat. If you've lost the link to the template or whatever, just ask for some help. would probably be wise to minimize your Zoom window so you have room to have the template up and your email at the same time, so you can cut paste from one to the other. And again, as I said, you should be able to click on the email address and have it automatically open your mail application and populate the to field. So those are the things I could think of now. Again, any questions, please post them in chat and we will try to help you. So what we're going to do now is, as Janet mentioned earlier, we can't actually go to the go downtown to the Golden Dome and meet our senators at the rope line. So what we're going to do is have a virtual rope line and take the next 15 minutes to email and call and Twitter and post on Facebook fast and furiously. Let's make our voices heard. As you go through this, please keep track of how many actions you take so we can tally those at the end. So with that, I think we should go off and be really active citizen advocates. And then we'll come back together in about 15 minutes. Well, I could see a lot of activity going on there. I hope it was a good experience for you. In a minute, you'll have an opportunity to share that experience with a smaller group of your fellow citizen advocates in breakout rooms. But for now, we want to tally the activity, the numbers of emails, calls, et cetera, that you made. So there is a link to a Google form that's being posted in chat. If you would click on that link and let's see. Julie, can you post that? Can someone post the link? All right, just a minute, and we'll have that link for you. There you go. Okay, so if you would go to that Google form and let us know how many emails, et cetera, that you sent and calls, and then we'll be able to tally that. So Cindy, if you'll track and see how we're getting our answers here. If you happen to, as you'll notice, the Google form goes up to 5. If you happen to be really prolific and you sent 10 emails, just fill the form out twice, and that will work fine.
Oh, impressive. We are currently at 63 emails, 77 emails, 3 social medias posts, 86 emails.
All right, I'll give the totals when we're all done. Cindy, if you can just tell me when we have about.
How exciting.
Yeah.
This will show you the power of numbers.
Mm-hmm.
You let me know when you're ready, Hildegard.
Okay. All right. I think we've got a critical number of responded and
Yes.
we've got, good, great.
We are at 96 emails, or excuse me, 101 emails, because I had some from the side, 2 phone calls, and 8 social media posts.
All right. We'll get the final tally after the breakout rooms. So in the breakout room with your fellow advocates, you might want to talk about how this process went for you. And then also think today, tomorrow, this week, this month, this year, what are the advocacy actions that you could take this week, this month, and this year, and share them with each other. And Karen, do you have the breakout rooms ready? All right.
Okay, that seems to be going well. You can unmute yourself. Let's see, let me get the participants up. Okay, let me ask you to unmute. I'm asking you to unmute. Okay, I'm going to broadcast a message to everybody. Can you, let's see, let me find that message. Hold on a second. Can you put that, well, let me get back here.
It's at the bottom of the thing.
Of the, yeah, all right. Let me just go ahead and do that. Broadcast message to all. Oh, shoot. All right. Well, going well so far, I think.
Yeah,
You did a great job.
thank you. Sorry about those email addresses.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Of
That's
course,
a nit.
you know, when you check them, you check the first one.
Yes, I know. I know. Oh, we're still recording, by the way. I guess I should.
You can pause it.
Oh, I guess you're right.
Mhm.
Pausing now.
Welcome back. Karen, you tell me when it looks like everyone's back, okay? Oh, you're on mute, Karen.
I think everyone's back now.
All right. Okay. Well, great. Well, I hope you had a nice discussion. And I wonder if you'd like to post something in chat, yeah, maybe a highlight of your discussion or a highlight of this morning, and I can share that, share a couple of those before we wrap up here. Oh, here's someone saying when they make calls, the admins seem pretty bored. Well, they probably are, but you can chat them up a bit and, you know, hopefully smooth that over a little bit. Any comments on? Someone wants to know if we have a link for ResistBot. I'm not sure I know what that is. Cindy, do you know what that might be?
I do. ResistBot is where you can do form letters. Those are actually less effective than your own email. I have learned about that through the whole process too, because I do a lot of these things. So you're better off sending your own email to get paid attention to.
All right. Phil, appreciate being taught some simple, effective ways to reach out. And Pam, your group was excited to meet Letitia from Cartersville in a red district who wants to get her friends involved. That is the main purpose today, is outreach. You know, what we started with today was reaching out to our legislators. And I think that was really good advice from Matt, Representative Matt Wilson, to reach out and talk to everybody we know about redistricting and the importance of it. Um, and Nancy says, nice to feel that not only did she learn a lot today, but she actually did something. Well, that's wonderful. All right. So good. I'm glad this worked out for you. So we had a preview of the numbers, but I think if you think about it, I often think when I get these emails from ACLU or whoever that says, please send your email, please call your representative. And my thought is, well, what does it matter? It's just me. But look at this, in 15 minutes, we sent 100 emails, made 2 phone calls, and 4 social media posts. So think about how many people have been impacted by all of us together in 15 minutes. That's pretty phenomenal. So drum roll and big claps to all of you. Great job. And I want to end with a quote from Margaret Mead: never underestimate the power of a small group of committed people to change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has. That one has stuck with me. So thank you all for your work today. This has been really great, and we so appreciate your efforts on behalf of fair mapping. And I'm going to turn this over to Janet to wrap up for us.
Great. Well, thanks, Hildegard. Thanks for organizing this today. And I also add my thanks to everybody. And let's talk just a few things about next steps. I think we learned a lot this afternoon, and now we have some tools to use going forward. So we really would like you to finish that outreach that you started today. I emailed all the senators on the list. After we wrap up here, I'm going to email to all the House members in the redistricting committees, and would ask that you do the same over the next few days. Also, please sign up if you haven't already on our Fair Districts website to get action alerts, because we will be doing more activities like this. In our breakout, we were talking about, the end of session and whether that was really the end of being able to make a difference here. And it's not. This is actually the beginning of being able to make a difference. As we get out of session and the focus will become more focused on redistricting, we'll have more opportunities. And as these meetings happen across the state and so forth, we want to reach out to you and get you involved, to be messaging, to be calling, to be attending meetings, etc. So sign up so that we can be in touch with you for those opportunities. And also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter, and amplify the message. So don't just read it. Please comment, share it. Let's get the word out collectively across the state about the importance of this year from a redistricting perspective. And then continue to join our programs here at Fair Districts. We've got a town hall that we're planning, an exciting town hall that we're planning for April. We have a targeted date, but I'm not going to announce it today because we're just finalizing all the details for that. But be watching for that message. And as you know, we recorded this session, so the slides and the recording will be available here in the next few days on our website, so that you can use those as a tool, and also share those with others that you want to get involved in this effort. So with that, we will close for the afternoon, and thank you to all of you and to all of our speakers for making a difference at Fair Districts Advocacy Day. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Clint is still on, but he's family, so I guess we can.
I know, I just removed a bunch of people. I thought, well, they're probably have it on or on mute or something.
Yeah, they probably were waiting for me to end it. Well, and I don't know if I can actually circle back and start a meeting if I've ended it, you know, I don't know if that's possible or not.
Well, you
So-
could use the same link.
Yeah, you can. But-
Really, I can stop it, I
Yeah.
can end it for
Yeah.
everybody and then come back and
But we're
start.
all
Yeah,
it
and then
again.
we just have to come on the same link again.
Yeah, but we're all
Okay,
here.
okay,
So
good
that's
to
fine.
know.
And that's
That all
a
worked.
one-time use meeting. If you're using a standing meeting, you can reset, but if you've set it,
Stop recording though, Karen.
Oh, yeah, you're right.